A king stands on a threshing floor of crushed wheat, high on a ridge in Jerusalem. But if you look closer at the geography, at the precise materials, at the architecture of every single structure built to house the divine, he wants the favor of a rebellious Jewish public. He wants the respect of his Roman overlords. So he builds. He builds a retaining wall the size of a small mountain. He paves courtyards large enough to hold 250,000 people. He erects towering colonnades of solid marble. He plates the massive sanctuary doors in heavy Corinthian brass. He covers the roof of the holy place with sharp golden spikes, so the birds cannot land and defile it. The construction takes decades. It consumes the entire economy of Judea. The glare of the white stone blinds the pilgrims walking up the southern ascent. The sheer scale terrifies the peasants arriving from the rural hills of Galilee. The sound of silver coins rings loudly in the outer courts, where the money changers set up their crowded tables. It is a masterpiece of ancient engineering, but it is a hollow shell. The priests wear the correct woven linen. The blood of the lambs pours at the correct hour. The Levite choirs sing the correct psalms of ascent on the steps. But behind the heavy woven veil, the room is still completely empty. No cloud of glory has descended. No fire has fallen from the sky to consume the sacrifices on the bronze altar. You start to see something the religious reading completely misses. The temple is not an ancient church. Herod has built the largest religious monument in the empire, but he has built it around a void. The glory of God cannot be bought with Roman money. This building is not a sanctuary. It is a political theater. For decades, the people walk through the massive gates. They buy their unblemished doves. They pay their half-shekel tax. They look at the gold, reflecting the morning sun, and they tell themselves the presence of God is safe inside the stones. They mistake the architecture for the overlap. They mistake the size of the stones for the weight of the glory. They build a wall to separate the women. They build a wall to separate the Gentiles. They build a wall to separate the ritually impure. Lines are drawn in the marble. Threats of death are carved into the stone in Greek and Latin, warning outsiders to stay away. The house of prayer for all nations becomes an exclusive fortress. The sacrifices become an industry. The worship becomes a transaction. The courtyard smells like a slaughterhouse, mixed with a marketplace. It is a religious machine, but the engine is dead. The overlap is not a machine. It is a relationship. And while the high priest is busy counting the temple tax, a carpenter from Nazareth walks up the southern steps. He looks at the white stones. He looks at the money changers. He looks at the entire religious empire Herod has built. And he prepares to tear the whole thing down. It is a portal. It is an architectural attempt to force a reunion. To understand why Solomon spent the equivalent. We are a species that constantly mistakes the container for the contents. We look at a spectacular monument, the soaring arches, the blinding marble, the sheer scale of the architecture, and we assume the divine must be trapped inside. John, chapter 2, verses 19 through 20. Jesus is standing in the middle of Herod's massive stone courtyard, surrounded by the chaos of overturned tables, scattered silver coins, and the frantic bleating of sacrificial sheep. The religious leaders demand a sign to justify his violent disruption, and he says, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." They laugh at him. They point to the massive retaining walls. It has taken 46 years to build this temple. And will you raise it up in 3 days? The word your English Bible translates as temple in both of those sentences is actually two completely different words in the original text. When the religious leaders point to the sprawling complex, the courtyards, the colonnades, the treasury, they use the Greek word hieron. Hieron refers to the entire sacred precinct. It is the real estate. It is the political machine. It is the human effort to construct a religious system. But when Jesus says, "Destroy this temple," he does not use hieron. He uses the Greek word naos. Naos is a highly specific architectural term of billions of dollars on a stone building, and why a later generation wept bitterly when they tried to rebuild it. It does not mean the courtyard. It does not mean the outer walls. Naos refers exclusively to the innermost sanctuary, the Holy of Holies. It is the specific, concentrated location where the heavy glory of God, the Kavod, is supposed to dwell. That vocabulary shift changes everything about this confrontation. Jesus is not threatening their real estate. He is rendering it obsolete. He is standing in the shadow of a hollow building, claiming that the glory of God has finally returned to the earth, but it is no longer housed in a room. The temple is not a building he is going to reform. It is a body he is walking around in. He is claiming to be the Mishkan. He is the portable overlap of heaven and earth, wrapped in human skin, breathing the dust of Jerusalem. For the first time since Eden, the dirt of the earth and the breath of the divine are existing in the exact same space without consuming each other. He is the garden walking, every blind man he touches, every leper he heals, every storm he silences is a manifestation of the Naos, expanding its territory. He is taking the Holy of Holies out of the stone box and dragging it into the streets. The religious leaders cannot comprehend this. They are protecting the Hieron, the external religious system, completely blind to the fact that the Naos is standing right in front of them, breathing their air. He is claiming that the divine presence has permanently moved out of the architecture. You cannot start with blueprints. You have to start with an eviction. A man and a woman walk out of an orchard, but there is still one physical barrier left standing in Herod's stone building, and it is about to be ripped apart. A sky, the color of bruised iron, hangs over Jerusalem. It is Friday afternoon. The air is unnaturally still. The spring sun goes entirely dark for 3 hours. A carpenter hangs on a Roman cross outside the city gates, his lungs filling with fluid, his back scraped raw against rough wood. He takes one final, agonizing breath. He speaks a single word, and he dies. But the climax of this execution does not just happen on the hill, a mile away. Inside the blinding white walls of Herod's courtyard, the ground violently shakes. The limestone pavement cracks, and inside the silent, incense-filled Naos, a sound echoes that no priest has ever heard. The sound of thick, heavy fabric tearing in half. The veil hanging in front of the Holy of Holies is not a flimsy window curtain. Historical records suggest it was as thick as a man's hand, woven densely from blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, embroidered heavily with the ancient cherubim. It is the flaming sword of Eden woven into textiles. It is a massive, the physical barrier declaring that the divine and the human cannot safely share the same room. And an invisible hand takes that heavy fabric and rips it from the ceiling to the floor. Cold air rushes into the dark. Empty cube. The ground outside is hard and dry. The gate closes behind them. A sword made of fire flashes back and forth of the inner sanctuary. The cherubim are torn in two. The barrier collapses. Most people read this moment and assume the tearing of the veil simply means we can finally go inside the temple to visit God. But the room was already empty. The presence had left centuries ago. The torn veil is not an invitation into a building. It is the presence of God breaking out into the world. The portable tent was a shadow. The golden room was a shadow. The stone walls were a shadow. The actual overlap of heaven and earth was dying on a cross, bleeding onto the dirt, absorbing the exile of Eden into his own physical body. The blood falls on the wood. The earth splits open. The curtain tears. The garden gate is shattered. The Naos is no longer confined to a geographic coordinate. The flaming sword has been extinguished by the sacrifice of the sun. For 40 more years, the priests will stubbornly stitch the curtain back together. They will keep slaughtering the lambs. They will keep chanting the psalms on the southern steps. They will keep running the religious machine, completely blind to the fact that they are guarding a dead monument. And when the Roman legions finally march into the city to burn the white limestone to the ground, they are not destroying the house of God. They are just clearing the rubble. Because the architect of the cosmos, guarding the entrance on the east side of the mountain, Eden was not just a park. It was the original overlap, has already drawn up a new set of blueprints. And this time, the materials he is using are entirely alive. The materials are not quarried from the earth. They are pulled from the dust of human failure. For thousands of years, the assumption was always the same. If you want to encounter the divine, you have to travel to a specific geographic coordinate. You have to walk up a literal mountain, smell the thick smoke of literal incense, and stand outside a heavy physical door. The overlap of heaven and earth was a location you visited. But a few decades after the crucifixion, a fisherman named Peter writes a letter to scattered, terrified people living in modern-day Turkey. He does not tell them to build a new shrine. He tells them they are the shrine. 1 Peter chapter 2. You yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house. A stone does not breathe. A stone does not bleed. But Peter is reaching all the way back to the garden. He is merging the dirt of the earth with the breath of the divine. He is claiming that the Spirit of God has taken up residence inside the fragile ribs of ordinary, broken human beings. The Apostle Paul takes this even further. It was the one geographic location where heaven and earth occupied the exact same coordinates. God did not merely visit Eden. When he writes to the church in Corinth, Corinth was a city famous for its monumental architecture. The towering columns of the Temple of Apollo dominated the skyline, casting long shadows over the noisy meat markets and the saltwater shipping docks. When the citizens of Corinth thought of a temple, they thought of cold, impenetrable marble. They thought of spaces guarded by armed soldiers and heavy bronze doors. But Paul asks this messy, a chaotic group of people, a startling question: do you not know that you are God's temple? And the word Paul chooses to write in his Greek manuscript changes the entire weight of the sentence. He does not use hieron, the word for a sprawling, external religious complex. He uses naos, the Holy of Holies, the specific, concentrated epicenter of the kavod. Paul is telling a group of flawed, struggling humans that they are the new coordinates of the heavy glory. The temple is not a destination you travel to. It is a community you belong to. God did not downgrade his residence when the Romans burned the limestone in Jerusalem. He upgraded it. He stopped living in houses made by human hands so he could start living inside the humans themselves. He walked in it. In the cool of the day, the dirt of the earth and the breath of the divine existed. When you sit across the table from someone who carries the Spirit, looking into their eyes over a shared meal, you are sitting at the threshold of the Holy of Holies. The overlap is happening in real time, in the messy reality of human connection. But this is still not the end of the story. The living stones are currently scattered. The portable overlap is walking through a broken world, carrying the presence through grief and illness and time. But the final pages of the Bible reveal one last vision of the garden, and it breaks every architectural rule humanity has ever known. An exile named John stands on a rocky prison island and looks into the future. He sees a new city descending, a new Eden, and he writes something that breaks every architectural rule humanity has ever known. I saw no temple in the city, because the entire city is the Holy of Holies. A man and a woman walked out of an orchard, and the overlap of heaven and earth was lost. A tent was pitched in the desert dirt, and the presence of the divine became portable. A king built a petrified forest of cedar and gold, and the heavy glory crushed the air out of the room. In the same room, without consuming each other. But the humans rebel. They are driven east. They lose the overlap. A remnant wept over a cracked foundation, and the inner sanctuary stayed completely dark. A politician stacked massive blocks of white limestone and guarded a hollow religious machine. A carpenter bled out on a Roman cross, and the thick, heavy veil tore from top to bottom. And a fisherman wrote a letter to scattered exiles, and the glory of God moved into human skin. One thread, one story. But here is the part I keep coming back to. The weeping elders standing in the rubble of Jerusalem. They looked at their modest foundation. They remembered the blinding gold of the past. And they wailed. They wailed because they thought the smallness of their structure meant the absence of God. If you are in a season where your life feels like that second temple, If you are standing over the cracked foundation of your own story, looking at a quiet, empty room, wondering if the silence means the glory has packed its bags and left, the overlap of heaven and earth is not a monument you have to painstakingly rebuild. It is a reality you already inhabit. The architect of the cosmos is not waiting for you to stack enough stones, or sing the right psalms, or weave a perfect curtain before he will sit with you in the dark. If this opens something in you, subscribe. Leave a comment, even one word helps. The smell of burning cedar and roasted animal fat hangs heavy in the autumn air. He is watching a cloud, and for the rest of human history, humanity is trying to build a bridge back to the garden. Share this with someone who is exhausted from trying to build a temple with their own two hands. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. And may the God who has never once been confined to a box of stone walk with you through your own ruins and remind you that you are the exact place where he has always wanted to stay. They try to build it with a tower of mud bricks in the plains of Shinar. They try to build it with golden calves in the desert. They try to build it with altars on the tops of high hills. Every ancient civilization reaches up, desperate to construct a ladder back to the divine. But a ladder cannot be built from the ground up. The overlap has to come down. And centuries after the Garden Gate closes, God speaks to a man on a mountain covered in lightning and smoke, and he hands over a very specific design to begin the restoration. Not a permanent building. Not yet. He commands them to sow a tent. We are a species obsessed with monuments. When human beings want to anchor their identity, they stack stones. They carve granite. They build structures designed to outlast empires. Heavy and immovable, rooting their gods deeply into a specific plot of earth. We want our sacred spaces to be predictable. We want to know exactly where the divine is located, so we can visit on our own terms. But the first structure God commissions after the exile from Eden is entirely woven. It is fragile. It is made of fabric and wood, a cloud so dense, so dark and thick with an unnatural gravity, that the priests stumble out of the building, gasping for breath. Exodus chapter 25, verse 9. A nation of former slaves is standing at the base of a trembling mountain. They have been stripped of their identity in Egypt. They are eating bread that falls from the morning dew. And they are sleeping in the dirt. They have no land. They have no city. And God gives Moses a set of blueprints. He says, "According to all that I show you," that is, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, just so you shall make it. The word your English Bible translates as tabernacle is the Hebrew mishkan. It is a beautiful, intimate word. Mishkan is a noun that means a dwelling place, a residence, a home. But it comes from the ancient Hebrew root verb shakan, and shakan does not mean to visit. It does not mean to observe from a distance. It means to settle down, to reside, to pitch a tent and become a neighbor. It is the exact same concept the gospel writer John reaches for centuries later in Greek, when he writes that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The Greek word there, skenu, literally means to pitch a tent, to shakon. That root changes everything about how you view this desert structure. The Mishkan was an architectural callback to the garden they had lost. He is dedicating a building, but he is not the first to stand at a threshold like this. Its inner curtains were embroidered with blue and purple cherubim, guarding the way just like the flaming sword. Its golden lampstand was forged to look like a flowering almond tree, a replica of the tree of life. But unlike the garden in Eden, this overlap was designed to move. The tabernacle is not a shrine for a stationary deity. It is presence, made portable. Imagine the sheer physical reality of this. Bronze clasps, holding together thick layers of spun linen, the coarse, rough texture of red-dyed ram skins stretching over heavy acacia wood boards, the sharp, overwhelming smell of crushed myrrh, cinnamon, and sweet cane rising from the incense altar, cutting through the odor of a million unwashed humans camped in the arid heat. God was not waiting for them at a distant destination. He was packing up his house and walking in the dust alongside them. for 400 years, through brutal wandering and bloody tribal wars. The portable overlap was enough. The tent moved from the desert plains to the hills of Shiloh, from Shiloh to the Jebusite city of Jerusalem. The tent was exactly what God asked for. But human beings always want to build something permanent. A man in a desert stands outside a tent of goatskin, watching a fire fall from the sky. A weeping governor stands over a cracked foundation of stone, and when a king finally sits on a throne of peace, he decides a goat hair ceiling is no longer sufficient for the creator of the cosmos. Thousands of men march into the mountains of Lebanon. Axes swing against bark. Giant cedars fall. Massive blocks of white limestone are carved deep underground in the quarries of Jerusalem. They are hauled miles to the top of Mount Moriah. There is no sound of iron hammers on the ridge. The stones are cut in the dark. They are assembled in silence. 7 years of labor. 100,000 workers. The interior of the finished sanctuary is plated entirely in blinding, hammered gold. The floors, the walls, the ceilings. The scent of fresh cedar resin mixes with the thick smoke of burning frankincense. Every carved panel shows palm trees, open flowers, and cherubim. This is not a building. This is a petrified forest. It is Eden reconstructed in stone and metal. Solomon is attempting to take the portable garden of the desert and anchor it permanently to the earth. The king stands before a massive bronze altar. He raises his hands toward the sky. He prays a sweeping prayer of dedication. Fire falls from the open blue. It consumes the sacrifices in an instant. And then, the cloud rolls in. A carpenter stands in a courtyard of white marble, pointing at the walls and talking about his own body. Same space, same search. The kavod, the heavy, suffocating glory of God. It fills the golden room so completely that the priests are physically pushed out the doors. They cannot stand. They cannot breathe. The sheer weight of the divine presence crushes the air out of the sanctuary. The overlap has touched down. The wandering is over. The creator of the cosmos has a house of stone. For 4 centuries, this golden peak defines the nation. It survives plagues. It survives civil wars. It survives terrible kings and desperate sieges. The people begin to believe the temple is invincible. They assume God will never let his own house fall. No matter what they do in the dark, they are wrong. A building can house the presence of God, but it cannot guarantee the allegiance of the human heart. The temple is not a magic talisman. It is a mirror. And when the nation turns its back on the covenant, the presence packs its bags. The prophet Ezekiel watches in a tragic vision as the glory of God literally lifts off the threshold, hovers over the Mount of Olives, and departs. Then the Babylonian armies arrive. Battering rams smash the silent limestone. Torches are thrown into the carved cedar. The gold melts in the intense heat, running like water into the cracks of the stone floor. Most people assume the biblical temple was simply an ancient church, a large, ornate building where the Israelites went to sing psalms. The Ark of the Covenant disappears into the smoke of history, never to be seen again. The overlap is shattered. The people are dragged east in chains, back into exile. Just like the first humans at the gates of the garden, the hill is left empty. The ash cools in the rain, but 50 years later, a remnant of survivors walks back into the ruins of Jerusalem. They clear the charred rubble. They lay a new foundation. And as the first stones are placed, something strange happens in the crowd. The young people shout for joy, but the oldest men begin to weep. A trowel scrapes against raw stone. A foundation is laid in the dirt. We often think of rebuilding as an inherently joyful process, a triumph of the human spirit over tragedy. When Zerubbabel and the returning exiles place the first stones of the Second Temple, Ezra, chapter 3, records a fractured sound. The young people are shouting, celebrating a fresh start. But the elders, the ones whose eyes still remember the dizzying height of Solomon's gold, are wailing so loudly that the joy and the grief blend into a single noise heard from miles away. We hear that weeping and we assume it is just nostalgia. Offer animal sacrifices. and try to earn the favor of a distant god. You have probably seen the diagrams in the back of study Bibles. We assume it is the natural grief of old men remembering a more beautiful past, a longing for the cedar smoke and the sheer scale of the original sanctuary. But their tears are not just nostalgia. They are a theological crisis. They are looking at the footprint of the new building. The dimensions are modest. The wood is cheaper. There is no Ark of the Covenant, no carved cherubim covered in hammered gold, no consuming fire falling from the open blue to validate their labor. The Holy of Holies in Zerubbabel's temple is completely empty. It is the hollow cube of bare rock where the presence used to rest, and the terrible, unspoken fear hanging over the elders in the dusty air is that God might not actually want to come back to a building at all. They have constructed the box, but they cannot force the overlap. If watching this history unfold is stirring up questions you've never considered before about how God actually operates, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the Second Temple stands compromised. For centuries, the Jewish people live around this space. They rebuild the walls of the city. They light the menorah in the holy place. They burn incense on the bronze altar, filled with measurements of bronze basins and courtyards, treating the space like a dead piece of ancient real estate. They sing the Psalms of Ascent on the stone steps, and they offer the blood of unblemished lambs. They go through the precise liturgical motions dictated at Mount Sinai. But the blinding, suffocating kavod, the heavy glory cloud that knocked the priests to their feet in Solomon's day, never returns to the building. The overlap remains broken. The silence is deafening. We are forced to ask a difficult question when we look at these quiet centuries between the Old and New Testaments. What do you do when the structure of your faith is entirely intact, but the presence seems to have evaporated? The Second Temple period is a massive, extended season of waiting. It is an entire culture holding its breath, staring at an empty room, wondering if the garden will ever touch the earth again. The answer does not come in the form of a cloud. It comes when a ruthless, paranoid politician decides to take that modest building and turn it into the largest religious monument in the Roman world. Whips crack in the Judean sun. Wooden pulleys groan under the immense weight of white limestone. Massive blocks are dragged up the side of the mountain. Some weigh over 400 tons. The dust chokes the air. A king named Herod watches from his fortress. He is not a priest. He is not a prophet. He is a paranoid Roman client king who murders his own family to protect his throne.